Horror Nights presents 4 true scary sleepover horror stories. Number 4. Kasey Peters' Sleepover. On March 24, 1958, 16-year-old Kasey Peters of Wichita, Kansas was hosting a sleepover with 3 of her friends who were all 15 because her mother was away on business. Knowing the girls would be home alone, Kasey's boyfriend, 18-year-old Eli McKnight, decided to play a prank on the girls. He made a mask from an old potato sack by cutting holes for the eyes and the mouth. He then grabbed a large hunting knife from his dad's knife collection. He went over to Kasey's house, and he just planned on looking through a window and scaring them. However, when he got there, he saw that all the curtains were closed. However, he did find the back door unlocked. He knew that Kasey's mother kept a gun in the house, but he didn't think that Kasey would have it out. After all, he didn't want to be mistaken for a real home invader and get shot. However, when he walked in the house, he was the one that was surprised. Inside the living room, all 3 girls were dead. They all had been handcuffed and stabbed to death. There was blood splattered everywhere. Eli threw up upon seeing the girls and called 911. When the police arrived on the scene, Eli was arrested for the triple murder but denied killing anyone. Ultimately, he was convicted of the triple murder and sentenced to death. After a few delays, he was scheduled to die on May 25, 1965. The day before the execution, Eli got a letter written on a typewriter. It reads, "Ha ha ha. Time is nothing but forking paths through a garden and our paths crossed. How lucky for me. I promise to explode in the next one at the same time that you drop. I'll count you as my 7th, and she will be my 8th." Eli showed the letters to the guards and he begged for the warden to look at the letter, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. He cried and screamed while the noose was placed around his neck. He finally stopped when the fall broke his neck. Sadly, the next morning, 23-year-old Phyllis Wilson was found murdered in her apartment. Someone climbed up the fire escape and broke in. She had been stabbed and sexually assaulted. The police were able to determine that the knife that was used was very similar to the one used in the slumber party murder. It's possible that it was the exact same knife because it was never recovered from the slumber party massacre. Years later, in the 1980s, a cold case investigator was looking into several similar cases where women were stabbed to death in their home. She found that within a 100-mile radius of Wichita, there were 11 murder cases that were similar to the murders of the girls at the slumber party and Phyllis Wilson, bringing the total number of victims to 15, 16 if you include Eli McKnight. 4 of the murders happened while Eli McKnight was sitting on death row, and 3 were committed after he was dead. The killings came to an end in 1972, and the police are unsure who was responsible for them. Number 3. Stephen Hall's birthday. On August 15, 2004, 8-year-old Stephen Hall was hosting his very first sleepover with 2 friends, and they were sleeping in a tent in the backyard of their Huntsville, Alabama home. They had a barbecue earlier in the day, and Stephen's father, Wayne Hall, had been drinking for most of the day. At 10 that night, Wayne checked on the boys in the backyard, and that is when he saw a man wearing a balaclava climb over his fence into his backyard. He also had a hatchet in his hand. Wayne ran and grabbed his shotgun and loaded it with 2 shells as he ran to the backyard. When he came out of the back door, he fired off 1 shot, pumped the gun, and fired again. The man in the mask fell, and Wayne heard screaming from the tent. Wayne's wife, Marie, came out of the house asking what happened, and Wayne told her that he shot a prowler. He told her to go call 911. Wayne made his way towards the man and found that he was lying on the ground motionless. Wayne looked in the tent and he was horrified to find that his son Stephen had been shot in the head. The police came and checked that the prowler was dead, and when they pulled off his mask, Stephen was shocked yet again. It was his 17-year-old son, Bobby. Marie and Dwayne's only children were taken to the hospital, but both were pronounced dead on arrival. The police determined that Bobby was trying to scare his brother. His father was arrested and charged with manslaughter. He was given the chance to post a bail of $10,000, but Marie refused to pay it. Wayne sat in prison for a few months before pleading guilty to 10 years in prison. However, Wayne didn't survive his first night in prison. He was stabbed to death by a member of a notorious prison gang. The inmate said that he did it because Wayne looked at him funny. Marie was investigated by the police, and a week before the murder of her husband, she withdrew $10,000 from her bank account, but couldn't account for its whereabouts, and she denied that she used it as payment to have her husband killed. When they asked her if she was happy that her husband was dead, she only said, "Dwayne stole my children's lives during my son's first sleepover, and now Dwayne is dead during his first sleepover in the penitentiary. I'm not responsible for his death, but I can tell you that justice was served." The police investigated Marie, but they couldn't find a connection between Marie and the prison gang, so the police chose not to pursue any charges against her. Number 2. Quinn Bartlett's birthday. For Quinn Bartlett's 9th birthday in November 1999, he planned a sleepover with 5 other boys who ranged in age from 8 to 10. On the morning of the party, Quinn and his older brother Alden, who was 12, got into a fight. Alden didn't want Quinn and his friends sleeping in the downstairs den because that was where the only TV in the house was located. By the time the party started at the family home in Plymouth, Michigan, Alden's mood had not improved. For the first hour of the party, he harassed the younger boys until he was forced into his room by his parents. When his parents said that he was able to come back out again, he refused to. His parents dropped off some pizza in his room and left him alone to stew. Alden heard his parents go to bed, and about 2 minutes later, a little hand quietly knocked on his bedroom door. At first, he ignored it. Then there was another set of rapping on his bedroom door. This time he stomped to the door and opened it. But no one was there. He grumbled and closed the door. He went back to his bed and laid back down. The instant he laid down, there was another set of knocking. He ignored it. A minute later, there was another knock, and again he ignored it. When the third set of knocking came, Alden ran to the door and saw the figure of a kid running to the basement stairway. Alden chased after him and then tripped down the stairs. A few minutes later, Quinn woke up his parents and told them that Alden had fallen down the stairs and he was hurt really bad. His parents jumped out of bed and ran to the basement. It was a horrifying mess, and it was clear that Alden was in rough shape. Alden's father knew not to move him, and he called 911, while his mother looked at him in horror. Alden was taken to the hospital, but he never woke up, and he was pronounced dead a few hours later. The police did an investigation, and they noticed some blood splatter on Quinn's pants. So they interrogated the other 5 boys at the party, and all of them quickly confessed. They said that they discussed killing Alden because Quinn hated him. They said they put fishing wire at the top of the stairs so he would trip while chasing after one of the boys. Once he fell down the stairs, Quinn then hit his brother in the head with a baseball bat to make sure he was dead. Quinn always denied it was murder and said it was an accident. Quinn was placed in a juvenile detention center until the age of 18. He was released in November 2008, and he was given a new identity. None of the other boys at the sleepover were charged in the murder, and their identities were never made public. Number 1. Kimberly Bowman's Slumber Party. May 18, 1983 was a cool night in Provo, Utah, and the Bowman family decided to sleep with the windows open to enjoy the cool breeze of the night. At their house that night, their 12-year-old daughter Tricia was hosting a slumber party with 3 other girls. When the girls woke up the next morning, they found 12-year-old Charlotte McKinney missing, so the Bowmans immediately called the police. The police found that a window screen had been cut out and the carpet was stained with the boot prints of a man with size 14 boots. The front door was unlocked, so the police think that the kidnapper simply let himself out with Charlotte. Sadly, Charlotte's body would be found in a ditch just north of the city days later. She had been strangled to death. The case sat cold for 2 years, and then 2 years to the date of the kidnapping, there was a fire at the Bowman's house. Sadly, the 3 family members of the Bowman family were not able to get out of the house in time. The fire marshal determined the deadly fire was an act of arson. However, they're unsure if someone in the Bowman house set the fire or if it was someone associated with Charlotte McKinney's family and the fire was some sort of revenge. A third, strong possibility was that the fire could have also been set by the person who kidnapped and murdered Charlotte. However, the police were not able to say with any certainty who started the fire. Then, 2 years to the night of the fire, there was another murder. This time, it was 16-year-old Sylvia Watts, who was one of the girls at the sleepover that night. She was stabbed to death while working alone in a convenience store. This murder completely baffled the police. Had it not been on the anniversary of Charlotte's kidnapping and the Bowman house fire, Watts' death probably would have just been written off as a random act of violence. The only girl left alive from the night of the slumber party was Veronica Rowe, who was, of course, panicked. The police planned on putting her in hiding with a new identity, but unfortunately the stress of the situation gave her a mental breakdown just a week after Sylvia Watts was murdered, and she was put into a mental institute instead. When she checked herself out in November 1987, she refused to go into police protection because she knew that she still had 18 months before the 8th anniversary, and she wanted to spend one last Christmas with her family before she went into hiding. The police didn't like the idea, but relented. Unfortunately, they didn't have it in their budget to watch Veronica's parents' house until she did go into protection. Veronica was made aware of the dangers and still decided to stay with her parents over the holidays. This decision would ultimately prove to be tragic. On Christmas Eve, around 8:27 p.m., someone kicked in the front door of the Rowe house and the security alarm went off. Upon entering the house, the intruder shot both Sandra and Richard Rowe in the head where they stood. When the police arrived minutes later, Veronica was missing. The police investigation concluded that the front door had been kicked in by someone wearing a size 14 boot. The Rowes were shot with a 9mm gun fashioned with some sort of silencer. As for where Veronica went was a mystery until the 6th anniversary of the slumber party. Her body was found in a ditch south of Provo. The coroner said that Veronica's muscles had decayed and weakened and her back was covered in bed sores. His best guess was that Veronica had been strapped to a bed for 17 months. There were also marks on her arms that showed she was given intravenous fluids, possibly because she refused to eat. Finally, he concluded that she was murdered on the day she was found. The killer probably just suffocated her by putting his hand over her mouth and nose. After the murder of Veronica Rowe, the killer with the size 14 shoe went quiet. No one is sure why he killed all the girls from the slumber party every 2 years. They aren't even sure if one person was responsible for all of the murders. Subscribe for more.